Budget session for Tuesday, November 12th will come to order, and the clerk will please call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller. Here. Mr. Tuma. Here. Mr. Gallagher. Mr. Schron.
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Here.
Mr. Jones.
Here.
Ms. Brown.
Here.
Ms. Stevens. Ms. Stevens is absent at the moment. Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Ms. Baker.
Here.
And Council President Brady.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Has anybody signed in for public comment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Betsy Norris.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the committee. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Miller and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm Betsy Norris, Executive Director of Adoption Network Cleveland. I'm here regarding an unexpected and troubling situation for our organization and to request you to consider providing temporary financial support to help us maintain capacity to serve the community during this transition. Adoption Network Cleveland is a 31-year innovative nonprofit organization that fulfills the otherwise unmet needs for individuals and families impacted by adoption, kinship, and foster care. At risk are programs that support some of the most vulnerable children and families in our community. On October 8th, we received word that our funding from the Victims of Crime Act, VOCA, was eliminated this year. This news was completely unexpected, as we'd been assured in the past that this particular government funding stream was extremely stable. VOCA funding comprised approximately 40% of our budget for the fiscal year starting October 1st, funding programs serving children who have been victims of crime and their families. This unexpected loss has forced Adoption Network Cleveland to take immediate action to restructure and make difficult cuts to sustain the core of our mission. This included layoffs or early retirement of 5 of our 17 staff and the halting of some of our program offerings. Even with this downsizing, we have a significant deficit in our budget, about $250,000. If we cut further, we will cripple our ability to deliver services during this critical time. We partner closely with the Cuyahoga County Division of Children and Family Services and have done so for more than 2 decades. Our organization has been a critical partner in addressing crises in our county's child welfare system and creating solutions that have worked. This partnership included significant funding from 2004 to 2016 through the county DCFS budget. At that point, the public funding in this public-private partnership was picked up by VOCA, which is administered through the Ohio Attorney General's office. This is the funding that was just discontinued due to no fault of our own and without notice. Many of the programs at risk today have their roots in the Adopt Kids initiative, on which we were the lead agency. The initiative, which launched in 2004, was designed to address the multi-system barriers to permanency for youth in our foster care system. At the time, the system was at a crisis level with thousands of children in foster care and over 1,700 youth in permanent custody. The initiative was widely successful in supporting some of our most vulnerable youth and families, bringing the number of youth waiting for adoptive homes down to a more manageable level. Programs have evolved over time to meet emerging needs, and new programs have been initiated with the input of DCFS. Due to the opioid crisis, Ohio and Cuyahoga County are once again dealing with a rising number of children in foster care, many of whom will not be able to safely return to their birth parents. The supportive services offered by Adoption Network Cleveland are critical to helping create and maintain stable, resilient families for these youth. Having lost one family, we owe it to the children and their new family to do everything we can to support them to be successful. Our priority in this current situation is to the children, families, and individuals and professionals in our core programs. Within the next year, Adoption Network Cleveland will be utilizing all of our financial resources and fundraising efforts to account for this loss in funding. And today we're actively seeking the county's support to maintain our most valuable and proven programs while we identify and secure opportunities for our future. If our organization were to no longer provide services in the community, it would leave a large gap in Cuyahoga County that could not easily be filled. Please help families continue to step up to meet the needs of our community's children through keeping support services available and strong. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Any questions?
We only take input at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Ms. Lou?
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the committee.
Well, right now it's not only the budget hearings we have for the whole county, and also there are other important entities in the county. They also have their budget process going on. However, while we are here working really hard to make sure all the departments, all the organizations will get some of the fundings to continue their good work, guess what? This particular one, their website is called clevelandhousing.org, actually got defunded without advance notice. Now, Health Human Service, all these departments already make their cases at a budget hearing already. Even the whole thing is not totally finalized, but I thought the budget is made by all departments talking to all their departments. So for all the organizations and their subordinates will all get the idea how this should go. Then now we have this total surprise. Now this particular website, this particular organization, the function is for people to get on there to search housing options. They can do that on their own. Homeless people, unfortunately, already got very limited housing resources, monopolized by Frontline Service and Eden. So for homeless people and the people at risk to be homeless, or for the people who having a very bad housing issue, they need to look for a better options. This particular organization is in conjunction of different efforts from different organizations put together. So now if you want to defund something like this, I thought at least they should get an advance notice. But no, this just happened very quickly after Office of Homeless No Services came here to tell you the case. They did not request too many things to begin with. And now all of a sudden, this particular website and this organization got defunded. So I'm not sure if that's really fair, but definitely it's a very damaging situation for the people who look for housing. Because not everybody can go to homeless shelter. We don't have a functional shelter to begin with, and plus the number is so limited. One for female, one for male, and small ones, about 3 for the families. So what do you want people to do? So if people have to help themselves, you should give them the tools, the choices. But now you want to defund a useful tool, a useful source for people to look for their housing choice, and without even giving any advance notice, just because the department came here to present the case, but the whole budget hearing is not done yet. Please help. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. Do we have anybody else signed in?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have one legislative item referred to this meeting, and I would ask that it please be read into the record.
Resolution number 2019-0224, adopting the 2020-2021 biennial operating budget and capital improvements program and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Thank you very much. That item is now before us, and we previously requested suggestions from both the administration and from council on possible changes to the biennial budget proposal, and we received suggestions from both sources. And our plan is that today we're going to deal with the technical amendments that were put forward by the administration, and then at the next meeting on Monday, the 18th at 1 o'clock, we're going to deal with the council's amendments. And so you have on your desk a sheet that lists the technical amendments and has a brief description of each, and I would ask the director to please give us a brief presentation of each item.
Maggie Keenan, Office of Budget and Management. So as Councilman Miller mentioned, we did submit a handful of what we generally refer to as technical amendments to the budget. None of these impact the general fund. None of them impact the HHS levy fund. They are either adjustments to special revenue funds that have their own funding source or transfers within funds that don't impact the bottom line. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Could you briefly go through each item on the list?
Sure. So the first one is a transfer of appropriation within the budget for the Family Justice Center. This is, the Family Justice Center is supported by a combination of HHS levy funding and funding from the City of Cleveland. We are requesting to move appropriation at the department's request from one character to another, so it's moving from personnel to other to pay for contracted services. The second one is a request to increase appropriation to the budget for the Wireless 911 Fund. Wireless 911 supports CCOMS, which is the 911 call answering system in the Department of Public Safety. The department has requested this. It's a combination of increasing to personnel to fully fund their staffing and a slight decrease to other expenses, which is to take out the budget for indirect charges that popped up there and I didn't catch it before we submitted the budget. The next one is for the Court of Common Pleas. Per the article that was in the paper, we've been made aware that we are going to be using part of the opiate settlement money to pay for the first year of the expansion of the drug court. This is the fourth docket that Judge Russo mentioned. So I am proposing to adjust the HHS levy budget for 1 year only to recognize that we are using settlement funds in 2020. We're not adjusting 2021, so that will be HHS levy funded in 21 if you approve the budget as is. The next handful are also for the Court of Common Pleas. This is reducing allocations that were for indirect costs to special revenue funds. These funds cannot be charged indirect costs. And again, we were using a new system. These kind of popped up. We didn't catch them before we submitted the budget. They actually don't impact the general fund at all, though, because I didn't take these charges into consideration when I was preparing my revenue estimates. Top of page 2, we are transferring appropriation from the Department of Public Works to the Medical Examiner's Office. This is in the general fund, but it's a one-for-one transfer, so it doesn't impact the bottom line. This appropriation is going to support the transfer of a contract from Department of Public Works to the Medical Examiner's Office, and it's a contract to manage the Medical Examiner's building. So we have a private company that manages that building. Usually the buildings are managed by Public Works. This one is not, because there's a lot of specialized services that are needed in that building. And both departments have requested to move the management of the contract to the medical examiner. The next one is probate court. Probate court is requesting additional appropriation in the guardianship fund. This is supported by fees on case filings to support a new guardianship program. I do believe that Judge Russo mentioned this in his comments to the council when he was here a few weeks ago. Court is starting a new program that's going to utilize a combination of graduate students and licensed social workers to do effectively wellness checks on anyone who's under supervision in the court to make sure that the wards are safe and all of their needs are being met. This does not impact the general fund. The next one is Public Works. This is to appropriate the new $5 license fee fund. This accounting unit was not mapped at the time that we submitted the budget, so it didn't transfer over into the new system. If council recalls, we increased the license fee by $5 last year, I believe. These years are running together. I think it was last year. It's $3.7 million that we're requesting. There is plenty of cash to cover this. The next one is a transfer within the Department of Juvenile Courts budget. Excuse me. So similar to the Public Works, at the time that the budget submitted, is we didn't have an account for the Courts Intervention Center. So we used an old account that wasn't in use just so we could get the impact into the levy budget. Now we have the account set up, so we want to properly reconcile that. So when we start the year, it starts in the proper account. And the last one is to the CGIS budget, which is now managed by the Sheriff's Office, requesting additional appropriation totaling about $230,000 to cover interface with the municipalities for their systems. And again, this is not supported by general funds, so they have enough cash to cover this. Questions?
Okay, thank you very much for a very clear presentation of the technical amendments. Are there any questions by my colleagues regarding these amendments? Ms. Baker, followed by Conwell and Brown.
Just a question, and it's not that I don't support the court's drug court. I do. I think we could use more, but I'm more of procedure. We haven't really discussed yet how the dollars will be spent. I believe that's coming up soon for the settlement money. So how is it that we can do this now before we've really had a chance to talk about? And I think, is that 600 and...
It's about 650,000 for
Okay. Personnel and
1
other, it
year.
looks like 600,000 or 700,000.
Right, the majority of it's personnel. So my understanding per the article, and I double-checked that
article?
with the administration, is we did have an agreed plan between council and the administration on how the first, I believe, $13 million was to be allocated.
Okay, what article are you speaking of?
So there's an article on cleveland.com a while ago, which, I mean, I checked my
Sorry.
sources. I don't automatically believe that, but I got a plan from
Mr. Chairman,
the administration.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I appreciate it from the councilman because I think there's a little unnecessary confusion here. We're not depending on articles out of newspapers.
I agree,
No,
but I checked with the administration.
Please. Well, that's good because that would be more appropriate. But the fact is that what we intend to do is pull that out of the budget, and we're going to do that later in the meeting for the reasons that you've determined. So I just don't want this to go around in circles for no reason, and we don't get our, the newspaper gets this information from us, not the other way around.
Usually. Okay.
Sometimes.
I read it in the newspaper.
Anything further, Ms. Baker?
No, thank you to the president for explaining.
Okay, Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair to Maggie. Transferring appropriations from Public Works to the Medical Examiner's Building. So that's just doing the funding, correct? Will Public Works still oversee?
No, my understanding is that the medical examiner is going to take over the management of the contract. And I think that's effectively been how it has been operating for the last few years. So Hugh Shannon, who's the administrator over in the medical examiner's office, he's the primary contract with the vendor whose name escapes me right now. And so I think that was also the impetus behind wanting to make the shift, because the medical examiner is effectively running this already.
And so that money will go into their budget now?
That's correct. They're both general fund, but it's a one-for-one swap.
Okay, and the one right under that, increase appropriation to the court's guardianship fund? That's a new program, correct?
It is a new program.
Have they had any discussions with DSAS to see if DSAS is serving any of those seniors now?
They will be, right? So I can confirm that, but DSAS, I'm pretty sure, is serving some of those seniors, and this is just an additional checkup, their check-in, so they're anticipating 10 to 15 minutes either, but just to make sure that these individuals are perfectly, being cared for. But I can double check with senior and adult.
I'd like to know and how many of DSAS is checking on these people? Because then why would we need to give 100,000 more? So I'll look for your response.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted clarification on the juvenile court. Was this any of these dollars in reference to the presentation that we had last week?
No.
No? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions and hearing that it seems to be our intent to hold out the one item until next week, I would ask if there's a motion to approve all of the technical amendments except for the first two related items listed under common pleas on page 1.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed say no. The ayes have it and the motion is approved. Now, what is going to happen next is that the motion does not actually amend the budget. The budget resolution has to be amended. So between now and next Monday, our staff and OBM will work together and prepare a substitute which incorporates these changes, and we will ask to approve that at the next meeting. At the next meeting, we will also consider all the council amendments and try to get that piece resolved. And if that piece is also resolved, then we could send the full measure to the full council for second reading on the 26th. If that all occurs as planned, then the meeting that's listed for the 25th, if needed, then that meeting would not be necessary. But we're going to hold that time open for now in case we run into some snag on the 18th. Ms. Baker.
I just had a question. Will we all get an advance list of the council's requests before we have our meeting?
Yes, we will. It will be sent, I believe, tomorrow. Is that correct, Mr. President?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. That concludes the budget portion of the hearing, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to the council president to call the executive session.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, we have quite a few items in executive session today. As you all know, all meetings of the Cuyahoga County Council are open to the public under the Ohio open meeting laws. Under that law, council may go into executive session during a meeting for specifically authorized purposes. During executive session, council confers outside of the hearing of the public. Council may not make any decisions about any matters in executive session. All decisions are made in public. This afternoon, the council will go into executive session to discuss collective bargaining matters and pending or imminent litigation. During this time, our live stream will be down, and we ask all those not needed for the executive session to remain in council chambers. Council members will convene in the adjacent room A and will re-enter the meeting once the executive session is ended. Is there a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of discussing collective bargaining matters and pending or imminent litigation?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Moving to executive session, Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Tuma?
Yes.
Mr. Gallagher? Mr. Schron?
Yes.
Ms. Conwell? Mr. Jones? Mr. Jones stepped out for a moment. Ms. Brown? Ms. Baker?
Yes.
And Council President Brady.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right. The ayes have it, and we will adjourn to the meeting for executive session. Thank you. This business, hearing none, we are in adjournment until 5 o'clock for the regular council meeting. Thank you.